Hello and welcome to the Beyond Limits podcast. I'm Jermaine Benjamin, one of the directors at Transition Partners, and this podcast is where we invite leaders from the talent, HR and culture sphere to discuss everything to do with attracting, retaining and developing people. Joining my podcast, really looking forward to getting you on, Andy. Delighted you agreed to join us, especially with obviously we've spoken many times about culture, people, obviously been on several courses together. So I was really keen to get you on and get your input and insight out there. I suppose how I'd like us to kind of open up really is, if you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of a background into your Parallax journey really. And I know of late, as one of the directors, you've kind of taken that route into kind of the people leadership route. I think we spoke about before, so I'd be really keen to kind of get your journey of how you've ended up in that kind of direction really.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a little new for me, this kind of thing, but yeah, hopefully it'll be good. So, yeah, a little bit about me, a little bit about Parallax. So I'm Andy, I'm the People Director of Parallax. One of the original 4 founders back in 2009. We're a digital transformation consultancy, first and foremost these days. We came from fairly humble beginnings. It was a classic sort of, not quite the garage, but in the front living room, coding on TVs and things like that, as a sort of small web outfit. Sort of over the years moved into a digital agency, I guess doing sort of small to medium-sized web builds. And now as a digital transformation consultancy, we're going out and doing a lot of thinking for clients, a lot of strategic work. And off the back of that, we also do the agency work to sort of build whatever it is they need building, I guess. I was originally the only front-end engineer that Parallax had. We also had a sort of back-end engineer and an FD who's into his DevOps as well, and then a chap that was into sort of business and design and strategy. So those were sort of quite good cornerstones for a successful business, really, from the word go. But throughout that entire sort of 13 and a half year period, I've been responsible for people and culture here, and just not always in title. I guess what was the catalyst for sort of moving into this role specifically? Over the years, we hired many engineers, and it became a necessity to manage those people. I then moved into the head of front end role, so managing a team of 4 or 5 people. And then as you get this as a founder, you keep trying to hire yourself out of your role, so from that role as well, and hired somebody else into my position. And I guess once we went past 25 or 30 people, we couldn't really spread the task of looking after people, or we could, but we wanted to do it really well, and to spread the task looking after people between the original founders wasn't really viable anymore, so it became clear we needed to have fairly specific roles, and mine sort of became the people director role. So whilst it was not a role that I'd done before in title at another business, I'd been doing it for 10 years or so in part at Parallax. So yeah, it's been really useful having a background in tech in this role as well. I don't think many people in HR have that tech background, so sometimes I struggle to understand people's problems at project level, but having experienced it myself, I think it does give me that sort of step up.
So just really interested about that, how over the last few years, how that's become really intentional in terms of it being people director and the business growing significantly. How have you found, or what do you think are some of the differences in terms of how you developed and what you've wanted to develop in the business over those last few years, going from kind of people looking after individual teams to actually, no, I'm going to be really intentional about looking after people from a more holistic perspective. How have you seen that kind of grow and develop over the last few years?
Well, I think the bigger your team gets, I'd probably say up to about 70, 80, maybe 100 people, you can kind of know everybody. So as we've grown over the last, COVID was a real bounce for us, really. Everyone needed to go online and very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Sort of many talks at the beginning of COVID, and it was all about speed. So that really played into our hands. And as we grew, we found that culture obviously took a real hit during COVID, but I think we managed it quite well. But post-COVID, we managed to get people back in the office, not by telling them to, but just by naturally people liking the things that we put in place for staff. Obviously, there's the socials and things like that, but
Yeah.
a few more of the core parts of culture that I'm sure we'll get into. And as we grew, it sort of became self-sustaining, I guess. And also as people moved into specific sort of crystallised positions, they weren't pulled, not from pillar to post, but they weren't pulled around so much. And therefore it gives you the clarity of thought, the time to think and actually strategise about what you want from each department. And in my case, that was really, really clear. Being given the time to think about what is it that people need here, what are they looking for at Parallax, how can we attract the right people, retain the right people. So yeah, I guess a few things.
So in terms of that then, kind of looking at it, taking up that people director role, looking at it more strategically, how have you seen that benefit the organisation in terms of you having that time to be able to sit back and actually look at the business from a more holistic perspective? You mentioned about retention, you mentioned about talent attraction, if I heard that in there, but also we spoke at length about talent development as well, which obviously takes time, like you said, to be a step away, look at things holistically and actually design some programs or whatever. How have you, what's the impact been since you've taken that responsibility, really?
Yeah, well, I guess in the years where I was acting sort of part developer or part manager and part people manager or people director, I always had my eye on 3 or 4 things at once. So you tend to always prioritise the low-hanging fruit, not always the things that matter the most to people. Whereas when you move into the position more specifically and you look at it more holistically, like you said, you start to think about, okay, what are the big ticket items here? What do people really want? They want really good leadership, they want progression, they want clarity, they want transparency, they want community, they want to know that you're investing in the right people, that you've got the right ethics. Plenty of things really. So some of the, when I sort of went away and had to think about those things, progression, well, if people want clarity and a path around progression, let's just do exactly that. So we created a progression framework, which had levels 1 through to 10. It's now 0 through to 10, which I'll explain in a second. But we split it into sort of bands, I guess, that most companies have. So, junior, middleweight, senior, and in tech firms you tend to have a principal role there as well, right through to director. We also had head of department positions, work for sort of people management, I guess, which worked quite well between 30 and maybe 45, 50 people, but then starts to break down a little bit when you've got people managing too many people. Also looked at, I created a leadership workshop, had leaders come in and speak to us. Also created an academy. So we wanted a sustainable talent pipeline, but we also wanted to just give a little bit back to the talent of tomorrow, I guess. We've all been there. Some of us have been through university, some of us did self-learning, some of us were taught by other people, but we've never had the guidance from an employer during that time. So I wanted to be able to provide that angle and make the transition from college or school straight into employment a lot smoother, so that people knew what they were getting into and knew that they didn't necessarily have to have a degree or this accreditation or another. And you know what, I could speak for days about the academy, but in terms of big ticket items, I definitely wouldn't have had the time to do all those things unless I was specifically in this role. And more importantly, I was available enough to drive it.
Yeah, that's really important, and I think it's important to recognise, Parallax as an organisation growing, and there'll be others that are in a similar journey, really making that decision for somebody to own that people sphere. I think it's all too easy to not be intentional about it like you guys have. And I suppose you're covering multiple angles there, aren't you? Because you're talking about the leadership, you're talking about an academy, you're talking about the career development pathways for anybody in between that bracket. So do you feel like you're covering kind of the full spectrum in terms of what your people want?
Yeah, I guess so. I think there's definitely always areas to improve. I think we've always, hit go with training, whether it be sort of resources or events or conferences, that kind of thing. We've always, I guess, taken calculated bets, but tend to sort of hit the go button and allow people to do stuff before thinking too much about it, which has helped. But I think I would like to structure our training offering a lot more, specifically and intentionally over the next few years. I think performance management here as well is pretty good, but I think there's definitely ways that we can improve that and make sure that people are receiving the right feedback, for example. So, we've looked at progression and academy and leadership, but there's definitely still areas to work on.
I love that you mentioned there. This kind of leads on to my next question, really, because you mentioned there about performance management, which is often, a very scary word, and HR focused as opposed to maybe people focused.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. And I remember when we spoke, a week or two ago, you mentioned about receiving critical feedback from employees and driving a transparent culture.
Yeah.
Obviously, like I said, you touched upon performance management there as well. Tell me a bit more about that, because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, performance management first. I think you touched on it, that it's a people matter before it's a software matter or just doing it for the sake of it. It needs to be people led. You can support it with software, but we've always taken the sort of the angle that one-to-ones are the main time. Fortnightly one-to-ones are the main time that you can be giving and receiving feedback, but also you don't want any big surprises. These annual performance reviews that you sort of build up to, and people get a bit anxious about them. Even as a manager, you get anxious about them as well. The reason as a manager you get anxious about them is because you might not have worked that closely with that person, or you might not have spoken to them in a while. If you're speaking to them every 2 weeks, then there shouldn't really be any surprises. You could still augment that with an annual performance review, but it should be pretty much a non-event, really, because you've been chatting about it, 26 times through the year. In terms of sort of critical, receiving critical feedback from employees, and how that sort of drives a transparent culture. Well, if people don't feel listened to and that they don't have a voice, then they'll just feel that they can't make any change and that you're closed-minded. In my opinion, transparent culture is about being open and being open about why you're making decisions as a leader, not just making them and hoping that people, hoping that they stick. It's about allowing staff to give critical feedback on a regular basis. It takes it that one step further. As well as the fortnightly one-to-ones with your line manager, obviously, we also run a continuous improvement and culture drop-in session every Monday for the entire team to allow staff to sort of contribute towards change. If there's nothing to feedback, that's fine. If they've got loads of things to feedback, then we'll prioritise them, but we'll also discuss the progress that we're making with those things, because if you're transparent about what change you're making in a business, it's less scary for people. If you're making a lot of change, of course, it's always going to be a little bit scary, and people might want to know a little bit more than you can provide, but you just got to be as timely as you can. Also, I feel like if you allow many people, or at least more than one person, to feedback you're triangulating viewpoints rather than just allowing them to be subjective, because one person's opinion might be different to the wider consensus. So yeah, it's always important, I think, in any respect, talking about any sort of feedback, to try and listen to as many people as possible and contextualise it.
I suppose that ties into the diversity of perspective as well, and how people view things and have a different angle on, for example, a change that you want to make in the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're making change for ethical reasons or for diversity reasons, it's really important that you're listening to people that have certain ethics, or ideally different ethics to you, or ideally a different cultural background to you, so that you're actually understanding all the different viewpoints. Because people who are different to you are obviously going to think differently to you, and they will challenge you to think differently as well, and better. So yes, that's really important with feedback.
And again, something you and I spoke about on a number of occasions, but I'm just interested for you to share some of the things that you've implemented to ensure that those who want to progress into management or leadership positions can. So I know you had some really interesting ideas around that, and again, have been quite intentional about giving people opportunities and pathways in Parallax. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess the big one has been the progression framework, which actually led from an ex-employee telling us in his exit interview that one of the reasons he was leaving was because he couldn't see the future path at Parallax. He enjoyed working here, he thought it was a great culture, he enjoyed the type of work he was doing, but when he said to us, where am I going to be in a year, in 2 years, 3 years, and we couldn't answer it, or we could answer it, or different people might have different opinions. It sort of, I guess he lost trust in us. And sometimes you just need to take that on the chin and say, yeah, we need to change. So we did. We created a framework split into 3 areas. So core behaviours. So these are the really, generic, core things that should apply regardless of what position you're in. So how you behave, what your attitude is, are you a leader, do you have respect for people, do you listen, do you communicate well, all those kind of things. And then the second part was the more specific bits to each role. So what does it take to be a good front-end engineer? What does it take to be a good delivery manager? What does it take to be a good DevOps engineer? And we split those out into 10 levels so that people could understand, okay, well, I'm at a level 3 now. I can see what's in level 4. I can even see what's in level 5. And it might be that I'm in level 3 and I'm doing some stuff from level 6. It might also be that I'm not doing some stuff from level 2 in the level below me. So you do have to have a bit of it has to be a conversation with your line manager and look at which areas you can improve. Obviously, leadership is a massive part of that. And I guess more specifically, when you get to senior levels or the principal level, we also have the sort of the management pathways. I think every business is different. You don't have to necessarily have a management job title. I think you could have management responsibilities or hats that people wear, and different people wear different hats, and it doesn't have to be really rigid here. But as long as you're very clear about the traits and the behaviours that you want to see from people, and you've written it down, you've codified it on your internal sort of intranet or whatever you've got, I think then people know it's really transparent, it's clear, it's obvious, and people feel like that Parallax is a place that you can progress. There's a few other things that we did as part of the third part of the framework was an organisational structure, so that you could literally see where you're heading in the company. Which leads me on quite well to actually another part of the framework, which was more of an ideology really, that we allow lateral movement as well. So it's all about assessing which skills people have, and then looking at playing to the company's strengths. And it might be that you're a DevOps engineer, but you might be a great people person, or you might have a bit of a design background. So rather than just pigeonholing people in one area, we allow them to grow in multiple areas. And I think leadership comes from having experience in lots of different areas and having context and understanding what others are going through. I think empathy is a huge part of leadership, so it's really important that you have a variety of experience as well, which is why we one of the reasons why we allow that lateral movement. I think also it's not just about what you've written down on paper in the progression framework as well. It's about being present and available as a leader and founder. You need to enable other people. You need to show leadership, lead by example, and by being in the office as much as we can and saying your door's always open. I know it's a bit cliche, but I may always make myself available. I think people sort of feel like, the leader here is approachable, then I can speak to them about my future and how I can replace them as a leader in the future, I guess. I guess that's a couple of the ways that we go through it.
And it sounds like you've kind of got a very structured approach, so people can see where they're progressing, they know what they need to achieve, but also there's a personal element where people can discuss with their line managers directly, they can have conversations. There's a culture of, like you said, I know it is cliche, but it's so true, an open door policy to some degree. It sounds like you're going to blend the two together.
Yeah, and I think tech has got a bit of a stigma attached to it that people, developers aren't very people focused, and I guess there's an element of truth in that. But we've had quite a few people come here and say, well, "How come all your developers are so sociable and so easy to get on with?" And partly it's just we've found great people, but partly it's intentional in the recruitment as well. We've always made sure that we've looked out for those people skills when hiring people, not just the technical skills, which I think is really, really important.
And we touched upon it already a little bit, but retention, it should be a focus for every organisation. I know a lot of organisations have some focus on it, and it's obviously a challenge for so many of us. Tell me a little bit about what you've done in order really to reduce losing people and good people. You touched on it a little bit there with the progression paths, but really as an overarching kind of principle, how you tackle or try your best to overcome losing talent and keeping people, really.
Yeah, I guess
it's a tough question, that, isn't it? It's a real tough one.
It is. I mean, we've got a bit of I've got a bit of a talent retention strategy. I think we've overcome quite a few difficult challenges as a small player in quite a big market. Obviously, we moved to Leeds after just a year and a half of trading. We were originally in York, and we sort of came into this big world of Sky Bets and Sky and William Hill and all these big players, and also competing with London and the US on market rates for salaries. I guess everyone's always wanted to work on the latest and greatest projects as well. So you lose people to that if you can't always give people the exact kind of work that they want to work on. But I think the key to all of those things is culture, especially for a small company. If you don't have a good culture, then what is your what's your EVP? What's your employee value proposition? Like, why should people stay with you over your competitors? And I think culture has been the real sticky point for staff. We do regular ENPS surveys, so employee Net Promoter Score surveys, and we also do a culture survey twice a year. And the feedback that we get in that is always dominated by the culture that we have here. And I think we've retained quite a lot of really, really important staff through that. So I guess, what do I mean by culture? What is essential to a sort of talent retention strategy? Well, obviously you've got a few obvious things, and I don't necessarily agree with these things, but I think they're a good baseline. You want good social events, you want a nice office, you want a good working environment, good equipment, good benefits, healthcare, a bonus scheme, flexible working, good salaries, etc., etc. But I think those are the things that people, those are the obvious things that people talk about when you talk about culture. I think it's more important to, we've touched on it quite a bit already in the last sort of 20 minutes or so, but making people feel heard, more importantly, making them feel understood, and that they can have a real impact at your company. Look at Skybet and places like that. We've had people leave here and come back. We've had people leave and complain about, working at Skybet and places like that. I'm sure there are absolutely brilliant parts about working there, but the overwhelming theme is that people sort of feel like they're a small cog in a big machine. And I think it's an impossible task for huge companies like them to solve that problem, because you kind of are, I guess. But it's about having the culture at a more localised, smaller level, I guess, and smaller project teams. So what's important, in terms of talent retention and culture here? Well, I guess having a clear vision, something that's quite lofty, quite ambitious, represents where you're heading rather than where you are right now. What journey you're going on. Do you have core values? What is really important to you? Your ethics. We touched on it also. Progression. Your work reputation. So by that I mean, is the quality of the work that you're outputting getting you good reputation amongst the competition? When we hire people, we say, how did you find out about us? And quite often it's like, we've heard that you do this, that, and the other, or we've seen some of your work on the award sites. I actually had someone quite recently who said, I actually applied somewhere else. I didn't even know about Parallax. And when they found out what I really wanted to do, they said, you need to go work at Parallax, not here. And they stopped the interview right there and then. Yeah, so Mike actually works for us now. So I think work reputation is really important, but also staff reputation. The sort of Glassdoor kind of thing. What are people saying about you after they leave? We've got a 4.6 or 4.7, 4.8 or something like that. It's a really good one. It's because we put in the work with our culture and make sure people feel valued here, and that we're saying the right things, and internally and externally.
And what do you think's unique about your culture? You go, we obviously work with clients, and we really try to get, under the skin of what they're about, so that we can represent that to candidates or partners. And some, have quite a relaxed vibe, quite jovial, dress a bit unique or quirky, or and then we go to some environments, and I'm trying to get some contrasts here, but some environments where it's a bit more serious and a little bit more. I'm thinking of a couple of our sort of mid to large, one or two of our mid to large clients where it's still a bit more, a little bit more formal, not overly, but different cultures, and they're suited for different personalities. How would you kind of sum up some of the unique parts of Parallax, really, from a cultural perspective?
Yeah, I guess I'm not going to share my secrets with you. No. Basically, I think it's just about doing. There's nothing going to be groundbreaking, but it's about focusing on each one and doing it really well. So obviously, I mentioned our culture, so our flexibility, I guess. So since 2009, since day one, we actually started as 4 people who just wanted to, move away from the corporate world that we'd just worked in, and have something that was a little bit more of a lifestyle company. And so we worked very flexible hours from day one, and I guess we all wore the dress code that we felt comfortable in as well, and we never shied away from that with clients either. I think sometimes, if you're a lawyer, you don't really want to be turning up in your skateboard gear. But if you're in digital, I think there's that allowance, I guess, from clients. They understand you're going to be a little bit, especially creatives are just going to be a little bit more free thinking, and so I guess we're afforded that extra flexibility in our sector. But also, I think, remote working, we were doing it before COVID. So it was actually by accident, to be fair. We had a couple of staff who moved away from Leeds for sort of family reasons, and we just sort of said, that's fine. And we learned that it was really easy to do. So when COVID rolled around, it was like, just multiply this by 20, and we should be good. And bar a sort of 90-mile trip driving around Yorkshire, dropping everyone's machines off. After that, it was quite easy, to be honest, because we're used to remote working. I mean, even nowadays, the flexibility extends to, we've got a chap that was born in the Bahamas, and he came to us a year ago. He still works here in the office. He's here today.
Wow.
And he said, can I work from the Bahamas for 2-3 months a year? And we were like, yeah, we trust you, you trust us. You know what work you've got to get done, and as long as you can do that and you can work to a reasonable time zone, time sort of slot, I guess. Yeah, and it's just worked, to be honest. I think it's also about being quite progressive with your policy making. We've got an EDI committee here, and we spend an hour a month thinking about different strategies and thinking about what staff want. We gather all the feedback from the continuous improvement and culture drop-in session that I mentioned, and we look at ways that we can act on that feedback. So we've got a menopause policy here. We've just updated our paternity policy about a year ago, so you get 3 weeks as standard rather than 2. Our maternity policy, you get 3 months full pay now, rather than statutory. So it's thinking about what people actually want in their lives. The flexible working in terms of dress code, hours, location, and what's going on in their life. Being flexible when people need parental leave, that kind of stuff. If you're really, really flexible, as long as you can trust your people and they trust you, then you know that they're going to make sure that deadlines get hit and that clients get responded to. And I think that mutual, trust becomes quite a sort of symbiotic sort of relationship with your staff, where you're doing things for each other because you trust each other, and there's that mutual respect. So I've waffled on a little bit there, but I guess, like I said, the culture comes from doing things that are core to us as humans well, looking after people's needs and caring about them as well. Our regular one-to-ones and discussions around progression and getting to know people. We have a professional development plan for every single member of staff, which lists their, the first couple of one-to-ones we go through their experience, their education, their career to date, their long-term goals, their achievements, their skills, their expertise, their short-term objectives, their long-term objectives that fit into our wider company OKRs. We have an action points section to make sure that we're holding each other to account on things rather than just using each other as a sounding board. We should hold each other accountable, even as line manager and staff member. I want my staff to hold me to account. It's not just a one-directional thing. And we take minutes of every single session, so that when the next session starts, we can look at what we've spoken about previously. So that we're caring about them enough, and things follow on, rather than just asking, "Hey, how you doing?" and then letting someone speak at you for 30 minutes. It's not about that. It's about creating a personal and professional connection with each member of staff, and then acting on that based on what they're telling you. So that's the hearing bit rather than the listening bit. If you hear what people say and then remember what they say, you're going to understand them on such a better level, that when they think, they get a message from sorry Jermaine, but if they get a message from a recruiter, they think twice about leaving, because they're valued so strongly.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of the bits I'm hearing in there, it sounds like you're, throughout everything we've spoken about, there's so much flexibility. It's more focused around the person, and actually outcomes are what's important, But also it sounds like you've got that real, and it's a difficult balance. But I think when people get it, it's a bit simpler to them, where you get that balance of that flexibility and freedom, but also getting structure as well, and meshing the two together. It sounds like you've really, really got that, and that's a bit of an art, I think.
Yeah, and you know what? You don't need millions of pounds as a huge conglomerate to achieve these things. You just need to look at yourself and think, do I care enough about my staff? And if the answer is no, then you need to get back to the drawing board and think, what do my staff actually want? Speak to them, ask them. It's quite a scary thing but it shouldn't be, but it's quite a scary thing for a manager to try and show enough humility to ask somebody what you're doing wrong or what you could improve on. But as soon as you show a little bit of vulnerability and you open up to a staff member, you're going to build a different level of connection with them, and you're going to start building that trust. So really, really important.
And just on the leadership bit, we've touched upon it already, but why do you feel it's so important to upskill your management and leadership team? I know you and I spoke a number of times about leadership courses, and we've shared some materials and bits and pieces. Why do you think it's so important to invest in your leaders in your business and your managers?
Yeah, I mean, everything that I've just spoken about for the last sort of 10 minutes or so, culture. Culture is about people. Leadership is about people. It's about communication. Mm-hmm. If you're not investing in people to make them good at leadership and them good at communication, then you're placing quite a risky bet, I think. You're placing a bet that your team is just naturally going to be well led and managed, and you're crossing your fingers and hoping that people will stay. Whereas if you're developing your leaders of now as well as the future, then you're not placing as much of a bet. You're investing in people. You're making them feel valued. You're leading by example, and they will see what good traits in you have the best effect, and that's they're actually going to lead from example, from the example that you give, I guess. So yeah, leadership, it's all about people. If you don't invest in people, then you're not going to get good leadership. I guess it's as simple as that.
And last question for you, Andy, is looking back your journey. It's really interesting as well. Just founder, developer or engineer nowadays, and then moving into looking after a team. Obviously, there's an element of your role, like us, dealing with clients as well, and then moving into kind of people management, and then ultimately leadership, really senior leadership. So there's quite a lot in there. What career advice, or what would you give to a younger Andy who is starting out in the world again, from a professional perspective? And I suppose ultimately that applies to anybody who's listening who's kind of on a bit of an earlier curve really in their career.
Yeah. How long have you got?
There's not much to correct.
Yeah. No. I think it's I think it's important to concentrate on what you can control, and don't worry so much about what you can't control. I think when you start out as a founder, I think you just think that, everything is your responsibility, but you don't need to know it all straight away. And you gain experience over the years. Just do your best, and like I said, concentrate on what you can control and do that bit really well. I guess linked to that, I guess experiment. It's okay to fail. You'll actually be way better off for it in the long run. That's what experience means. You get experience from failing. I'm sure there are plenty of social media influencers on LinkedIn that are quite happy to speak to you at length, about failing, and Richard Branson, Stephen Bartlett, all these people that all they're talking about is being okay with failure. And also as a business owner, you need to be okay, and this is really difficult. You need to be okay with other people's failure. Let people fail gracefully. And support them, help them get back up. Because if you don't help them get back up, they'll just feel, lost, and they'll feel like you're the disappointed parent that's never going to, be happy with them again. But the reality should be that you explain, you show that vulnerability. You said, I've made this mistake before. It's fine to make mistakes. If people keep making repeated mistakes, then you've probably got a different problem. But yeah, for my younger self, I would definitely say experiment, and don't be afraid to experiment. It's actually one of our core values here is to remain curious. Okay. I'm sat opposite a lab, and we've got an ice bath we've got street lights, and we've got a game show in there at the moment. And you know, quarter by quarter, it's a different set of objects, and we wouldn't have had those kind of projects, unless we were really curious. You know, say yes and then figure it out later. You know, as long as you can fake it till you make it. No, I think it's important to have a real good technical understanding as a baseline, but do say yes to things, explore things, be curious, experiment. You know, hack is a classic word. We run hack days here. You know, focus on your professional development, your personal development, and you can't go too far wrong. I guess finally, try and nip things in the bud early when it comes to people matters. I think everyone's so much more approachable and appreciative when you're timely with your feedback, you know, with your responses, with your advice. If you just sit on matters, they won't just go away. You'll just look a little bit spineless, to be honest, and like that you don't really care. And that goes back to that sort of care and respect piece, doesn't it? If you want people to respect you and feel valued and want to stay around, then, you know, it's just like with friendships, really. You don't have to overcomplicate it. Friendships and family, you know, you treat them right and they'll stick around. So yeah, I think make sure you're timely with feedback and just treating people right, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Some amazing bits of advice there, just to wrap up. Look, you've been absolutely fantastic. Again, thank you so much for coming on. People want to connect, you can connect with Andy on LinkedIn. Also, if you've got any questions or follow-up from our pod, please email me. Connect with me on LinkedIn, but email me, jermaine.benjamin@transition-partners.co.uk. You can have a look at the fantastic work that's been done at Parallax.
Yeah, PARALL.AX. Just search Parallax. You'll find our Twitter, our Instagram. You'll find my TikTok. No, I'm just kidding.
You dances.
Not the TikTok. Yeah, I should. But yeah, you'll find us Parallax. That's 1 R 2 L's.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Much appreciated, Andy.
Cheers
for joining.
Cheers, Jermaine. Thanks for your time.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to the Beyond Limits podcast. If you have any questions that we can answer at all on the podcast going forward, or if you would be interested in being a guest on the podcast, please email me directly at jermaine.benjamin@transition-partners.co.uk. Thanks again.